The Johannesburg Stock Exchange, JSE, has reported stable financial results for the first half of its financial year. Despite a challenging macroeconomic, political and trading environment, the JSE achieved a net profit after tax of 493 million rands and headline earnings per share of 606 cents. Viv Govender, portfolio manager, joins me from South Africa for this. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Right. What factors do you think contributed to JSE's, stable financial performance in the first half of the year? I mean, that's despite a challenging macroeconomic and political environment.
Well, I mean, the JSE's volumes have not been great and listings have not been as strong as they once were. We've had a couple of listings in the last year or so, but they've primarily been, with the exception of, like some exceptions, they've primarily been cases where existing companies are split off divisions and, had them listed on their own. That being said, the JSE remains, a keystone of the South African financial system with our Regulation 28 requirements, etc., for retirement annuities, meaning that there's, trillions of rands, hundreds of billions of dollars that have to be basically invested in South Africa, and the JSE benefits from that. So to some extent, there's a floor to how low it can go. But the last year or so, we've seen, some stability return to the market. We've seen some new all-time highs being hit. And that comes through because of things like the positive outcome of the election.
Right. Talk to us about the role, some sectors, maybe the investor services and commodity derivatives sort of played in the overall financial performance of the JSE.
Oh, it's essential. I mean, if you look at the JSE's, in sectors, I mean, obviously, resources are not what they once were. I mean, Anglo-American, BHP Billiton, etc., are still, major players in the market, but they're not what they once were. The biggest company in South Africa is Naspers, which is basically a telecoms company, not telecoms, like an IT company, internet company, due to its, holdings of Chinese company Tencent. We have, obviously some industrials here. We have banks as well. It's quite significant, but, historically, and, it's lesser today, resources remain a huge part of our economy. We've seen a bit of a pullback recently, especially in the very important platinum sector, due to things like the drop in the platinum price we've seen over the last few years. For those that recall, back in the day, it used to be platinum cards were more valuable than gold cards, or they're better than gold cards because platinum was a more expensive metal. That's no longer the case. Platinum is worth like less than half what gold is worth by weight. And that comes through for a number of different factors out there. And that's obviously affecting, like I said, a key sector in terms of our banking, of our material sector. Gold has done reasonably well, but we've also seen, moves in the sector as well, with BHP Billiton trying to buy out Anglo-American sans its South African assets.
Right. Let's look at this now. I mean, with non-trading income representing 39% of total operating income, how does the JSE sort of plan to further increase this proportion in the future?
So say it again, please. I couldn't hear that.
All right, I was talking about how that to a very large extent we see non-trade income getting up to 39%. And I'm asking how the exchange plans to further increase this proportion in the future.
Yeah, look, information selling pricing to, different providers out there is always been a very important part of the JSE's, business, as well as, obviously listing companies and so on. The listing, like I said, has come down. Trying to, get more activity happening in the JSE, I think, would be probably the better way to do these things. You really can't have, the whole the exchange grow without more trade occurring. And like I said, trade has been rather tepid over the last little while. We do see a little bit of recovery in the South African economy. We see more companies list on the market, which we have not, like I said, seen for a while. And I think as a byproduct of that, we'll see the non-trade income rise as well.
Right. Tell us, do you see a disconnect between what we see in the JSE and what is, obtainable in the real economy?
To a certain extent, that is true. I mean, like I said, our biggest company is Naspers, and it's more dependent on the Chinese economy than it is on the South African economy because of its holdings in Tencent. We have a number of different players out there, like, for instance, Sasol, obviously, which makes, petrol from coal. Their operations in Lake Charles have been a huge impact on their, bottom line. Obviously, because people in Africa would know MTN as well. There's been a number of companies that have had exposure internationally. But this year, surprisingly, it's been the South Africa Inc. companies, the companies that are more based in South Africa, that have done really well over the last few months. Like I said, after the election, when we had the announcement of the Government of National Unity, which was seen by the market to be a positive because it would basically probably reduced some of the corruption, some of the inefficiencies we're seeing in the government, or had been seeing in the government until that point. We've seen a nice, strong recovery coming in things like the banks, the retailers in South Africa, etc. And if you can see that continue, I think as a side effect, we will see more activity in the GSE. And also, I mean, if the economy improves, obviously people have more money to invest, and that will also attract more investment to the GSE.
Right. So what significance, does the listing of 8 new sustainability bonds, what significance does that hold for the GSE? And how does it sort of align with, your broader sustainability goals?
Say it again, please. I couldn't hear that last bit.
What did you say?
I said, which part is listings? You said something listed.
Okay, I was asking.
Yeah, what you said.
Okay.
Yeah.
What significance does the listing of, 8 new sustainability stocks, what significance do they have for the GSE? And how does that align with the broader sustainability goals? Talking about sustainability bonds, the 8 new ones that were, listed, yes.
Unfortunately, in South Africa, the sustainability, initiatives have not been as strong as we've seen elsewhere in the world. We're still dominated by the old companies that haven't really had, too much in terms of their operations change for sustainability measures. In terms of what's been happening, with these listings, I think it gives an option to investors out there who want to make a more ethical investment choice. And there's been evidence that the ethical choice has often been the more profitable choice in the long term, but there's no, definite confirmation of that. But I do think that having that as an ability is important. But you must mention that, like, for instance, Glencore recently came out and maintained its coal operations, which is obviously going to harm its ESG score. When it comes down to it, ESG versus profitability, often investors are going to focus more on the profitability and the money-making aspect as opposed to the environmental social goals aspect of it.
Right, thank you so much, Viv Govender, for your time and thoughts on Business Edge today.
Thanks for having me.